Hello, everyone. Welcome to Writers Morning Out. This is a free gathering of writers of any genre, of any level, sponsored by the North Carolina Writers Network. I'm Penny Cottrell, and this is our recap of the North Carolina Writers Network Fall Conference that we had in Wrightsville Beach last weekend. If you are not speaking, I would ask that you put yourself on mute just so we don't get any external noise. But feel free to pop in and ask questions as we go. I think we're going to be sharing a screen. So if I don't see you waving me down, then just unmute and speak up and feel free to ask questions. I'm going to let Louise go first because she has a prior engagement at the bottom half of the hour. And then Tom is going to give us his notes from the workshop. Hi, Tom.
Morning, Tom.
And I do have two quick reminders from the network. If you would like to sign up for the December class, the online class that they're offering, it's Romance Plotting and the Healing Journey with Diana Biller. There is also the Barracks Bays Poetry Contest, and this closes today. So if you have something prepared, great. These are poems by any serving member or veteran of the U.S. military. And then also, if you are not a member of the North Carolina Writers Network, I encourage you to join. It is a fantastic group and lots of great resources for you. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand it over to Louise. And Louise, I will share your
Great. Yeah, the sheet that I typed up, that'd be great.
yeah,
Thank you. Good morning,
let's
everybody.
see.
Yeah, I will echo what Penny just said. If you're not a member of the North Carolina Writers Network,
Let's
it
see.
is really a worthwhile program. There are just so many opportunities to share and mingle with like-minded writers, and it is a very collegial, supportive group. And that fall conference, the one we just came from, was an amazing conference. I just can't recommend it enough. I try to get there every year, even though I'm out here in Los Angeles. It's just one of those not to be missed events, and everything about being there this past time, including the weather in Wrightsville Beach, confirmed all that I'm saying. It was just from 7:30 in the morning until I didn't get back to my room until 10:30, 11 o'clock every night. Really a rich, long, worthwhile day. So I encourage you to go if you haven't done it before. I took the master class in fiction with Teresa Ann Fowler, and the title of her class was Highly Effective Fiction. For those of you that might not know her, she's written many novels. Her very, very famous one is Zelda, the novel about F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda. That was both a very successful book, but also turned into a multi-series. I believe it was a Netflix movie. Really watchable. So if you haven't seen it and you'd like to see it, I recommend it. Anyway, she is a lovely writer. She's a wonderful teacher as well. Very open, very generous. And she shared with us what she is titling Highly Effective Fiction. It's a class that she's put together for other workshops. She had just returned from New Mexico, where she did a workshop, like a 4-day workshop. I believe she was in Santa Fe. And I know she travels around doing these. I can recommend her strongly. She really did a great class. We covered a lot of material. She used the first morning session to cover this material, and then the second two continued to introduce ideas to be able to write highly effective fiction. And we also critiqued the 12 member submissions during that time. So it was packed. We went over all 3 sessions a few minutes because there was just so much to do, and nobody wanted to leave. So I highly recommend her if you ever have an opportunity to meet with her. Anyway, basically what she did in putting this class together, and that what she taught in Santa Fe as well, is she sat down and thought about, her past. She has a novel coming out now, I believe in March. It'll be her 5th novel. I think that's right. Anyway, she said she, wanted to think about how she put these various novels together and what made them either successful, more successful, less successful, if there was some way she could kind of map it out, because I could tell just from interacting with her during the sessions that she is a very organized person, or at least tries to be, on top of being a creative type. So, she's trying to blend those two ideas or techniques together to come up with a way to write efficiently. So these are her ideas. And she found that with the novels that were picked up more quickly, that she kind of followed a set of pre-planning ideas that made a big difference for the outcome of the novel and how quickly it was picked up. So that's what this is about. First of all, she said, highly effective fiction meets or exceeds the expectation of its target readers. The first thing you got to do is identify your target reader. And she mentioned that Stephen King writes for his wife. And he has said that many times, and that every single book he's ever written, she is the target audience. She is his major reader, and she gives the feedback. So he always and only writes for his wife. Whoever else reads it is, is like icing on the cake. But she reemphasized that that's the first step to writing effectively and efficiently, is to make sure you know who you're writing for. So she kept coming back to that over and over again. Who is your target audience? Because that will help you make so many other choices. And you won't kind of zigzag back and forth. You'll always be on target because you're always writing for that target. Number two, she said, crystallize your vision of what the story is meant to be and meant to do. And she, put more time into that as well. Establish your target audience immediately, even if it's only one person, like Stephen King, and then crystallize your vision of what that story is going to be before you start writing. Number three, she called these the peaks and valleys of writing, what we control. She suggested we imagine something like the Iditarod race. You can never control the outcome of the race. That's impossible. But you can go well prepared so that all the things that are under your control, you've done really well. And so she used that metaphor of the race being pre-race factors that you can control. You get a good sled, you have all the right gear, you get the dogs that are well fed and trained. Thorough preparation ahead of time leads to success with publication as well. And that's the whole point of this list, is that if you plan ahead, you're more likely to have a successful written project at the end. So number four, she said, make a map. Have a map in front of you. I think sometimes we imagine that writers aren't very visual, that maybe painters or sculptors are more visual than we are. But her point was, have a map and literally write it down, with the map identifying your target reader and then thinking about what they prefer. Identify your reader and then deliver to them what they want. If you have a milk drinker, you're not going to take them iced tea. You want to take them milk. If you identify a mystery lover, you're not going to take them a romantic comedy, because they're hoping for a mystery. So if you identify clearly who you are writing for, it'll help you with all the other decisions down the road. Get to know your reader more intimately. What do they like? Do they want a page turner? Do they want a mystery, a romance? Do they want well-written sentences? Do they want to care about the protagonist? Do they want to relate to the protagonist? Is it more of a seeing yourself in that protagonist? Does your reader like short chapters, longer chapters, and more intricate details? These are all little specifics that you can think about before you even start writing your project, and they're going to affect where your book ends up, in the hands of the correct target audience, or maybe it kind of zigzags back and forth between several, which means it's harder to publish. Identify similar authors that produce the novels that target the same audience that you do. Look at those books, read them, get to know them, and look at how they target that audience that you're also going after. Number five, she called effectiveness of parameters. Set these parameters, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, set them, and then write to your specs. All right. So if you're having a problem with a paragraph or a chapter, it's very helpful to go back to your specs and see what your reader wants, because you can get stuck. Anybody can get stuck. You're like, oh my gosh, how do I get now from the mountaintop down to the valley? Well, go back and see what your reader wants to see happen, because that'll often unstick you and help you keep your book on track. When your story is ready to go out into the world, so you've done numbers 1 through 5, you've written a book, you have it, and your story is ready to go out in the world, what is your goal? You want to think about this ahead of time. Do you want to tell a family story? Do you want to just, are you writing just for your family? There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are, then that will help you get to that finished product appropriately. But if you want to get published, for example, by an upmarket publisher, you want to get it made into a movie, all that should be in the back of your head while you're writing. And it should be on your list. It should be in your map. Because you'll do more research and prepare yourself better even before you start writing in order to get your published product where you want it to go. Number 7, she said, imagine an inverted triangle, with the base on top and then let's see if I can do this. Anyway, comes down like that. So flat top, point at the bottom, an inverted triangle. The base is on the top, the apex is on the bottom, macro to micro. Your macro, of course, is all the planning that you're doing ahead of time. The micro, of course, is the finished product. The beginning of the novel is up top, all the details funnel down to the apex and to the ending. Number 8, clearly define your genre before you write. Now in class, we talked about a lot of different genres. I would say there were 12 people in our class. There were probably 8 different genres that we were writing for. Every single person was writing for a different genre. It was really interesting. And what we did with Teresa was also talk about how genres have kind of merged and also, diverged. So be sure as you identify authors who are clearly writing in the same style that you're envisioning your book to go, that you understand your genre. And there's a reason for that. As she said, that while there's always room for a standout novel that who knows what genre it is, it's just amazing, right? Most agents and publishers will be looking for a novel that meets the current trends and tastes of readers, as well as their own tastes. There are very few agents that are always looking for any kind of book in any kind of genre. They all have specific areas that they excel in or that they're interested in. So it'll be really helpful for you in terms of trying to get your book published to have a specific genre where you really meet that genre and you're not outside of it. And again, she said, there's always a book that defies everything she just said about point 8. There are books that are simply not definable, or you can't put them in one specific genre. But she said, especially as you're setting out, much better to pick a genre, the one that you think matches best the product that you envision producing, and stay within that genre. Number 9, the prescriptive structure, the story shape fits within the genre of your choice. For example, a historical odyssey, she used the acronym HOLST. You've got hardships, obstacles, losses, setbacks, and triumph. That's kind of the story shape for a historical odyssey. And within each genre, the story shape usually has a specific way that it unfolds. And you probably ought to stick to it, as you're writing. And again, with that proviso being that, there are always standouts that break all the rules, but highly effective fiction, especially if you want to knock out a novel that, gets published, chances are you should stick to the story shape that you're envisioning. Number 10, identify why the reader should care about the protagonist or their story, and then tell that story. Readers really do want to worry about your protagonist and care about your protagonist. You need to identify why that is and include those details. Number 11, and this is all pre-writing your novel, the premise summary. We worked with this a little bit in class, but it takes practice, 25 words or less. It's the elevator pitch. You want to write in 25 words or less the gist of your book. Opening conflict, initiating event, obstacles, and stakes. 25 words or less, and it really does need to be that. You can Google this, you can practice it. when I was in my MFA program a couple of years ago, we worked on this with my screenwriting classes because if it's more than 25 words, it simply won't get read. So you have to do this if you want to pitch a screenplay, and you get better at it. You can practice with other people's works. Books that you've read, don't read the back cover where they're giving you one, but try in fact to do the 25-word summary of books that you've already read, and then fit your own into that, and then use that as part of your roadmap. Number 12, specify what feelings you want the reader to take away from the book afterwards. So you want the reader to care about your protagonist, you want them to worry about them, and what do you want them to take away when they're done? What impact do you intend to have on the reader? What emotions do you intend for the reader to take away? It's good to have this listed so that when you are in the middle of a chapter or an event, a scene, it allows you to check back at that list and be sure you're not deviating, kind of getting off the train, at the wrong station. Keeps you on board. Number 13, she also said, imagine a house. What materials and tools do you need to build it? We would never start building a house without pulling together all the tools and the materials first. Your contractor does that for you, right? You must imagine building a house when you're writing a book as well. You pull all that material to your tabletop ahead of time, the time period, the characters, language and punctuation, pacing, tense. She talked about tense for a long time, both saying how important your tense choices are, as well as how careless people are these days with the past tenses, that they don't write very well. She's shocked at how poorly people handle past tense, past perfect, and things like that. Therese, of course, is a literary person, and well trained with her MFA at NC State University, and teaches, and she said it's surprising how careless people are with tenses these days. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Read carefully. Many of our word programs now that we're typing in offer grammar suggestions. Chances are they're right. Take your time to go through those suggestions. Be careful with your tenses. And she also said, POV, of course, is one of the most important decisions you'll make, along with the choice of tense, before you start writing. And yes, you must make these decisions before you start writing. Number 14, POV, super important choice. First person, very hard to do. A lot of people do write in first person, novices especially, and they are choosing the hardest tense or point of view to write in. And and it's not just because it's hard to do, but it really limits the narrator to only what they can know. So it takes a lot of tools out of your tool chest. She was mentioning that many agents will not take a first person POV from a novice writer. They'll tell you to go back and rewrite it from third person before they'll even read it, even if they are interested in the book, because agents also agree that first person narratives are very difficult to do and are often unsuccessful. So be very careful with your POV. Debut novels, as she wrote here, agents tend to prefer third person. Number 15, shapes of stories. Got this wonderful handout from Kurt Vonnegut that she showed us. You can Google the YouTube video on this. It's called Shapes of Stories by Kurt Vonnegut. Man in a Hole, Boy Meets Girl, Which Way is Up, Creation Story, Old Testament, New Testament, and Cinderella. See the YouTube video. It's hilarious. Anybody can Google it. It's available to everybody. And I'm just going to show you that this is the handout that she gave us. It's from that video, and it's a wonderful, basically, dissection of the shape of stories, shapes of stories. Yeah. Anyway, I just recommend that you put in Kurt Vonnegut shapes of stories into your Google, and you can pull it up on YouTube and watch him do it. As she said, he's much funnier than she was, so she played the video for us, and we were howling, at his hilarious antics. But he's absolutely right. These are the shapes of stories that have always been used and continue to be used, and they're pretty specific. And you probably ought to stick with the format of each of these if you're going to, have your story be one of these shapes. They basically are a roadmap to telling your story properly and giving people what they're used to and what they want. So this was our 3 sessions with Therese Ann Fowler. Very helpful, all of it pre-planning before you ever type the first word of your story.
Thank you, Louise. This is so helpful.
Mm.
We only have you for a few more minutes. I know you need to go, but does anybody
I-
have any questions for
yeah,
Louise before?
I'm good for 10 more minutes. As long as I leave
Okay,
by 10:30ish, I'm good, just because of the rain.
yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Louise? I'll do this so we can see each other again.
Sure, I know that was really fast. I do not have permission from Therese to allow you to have that sheet from her. But I think the main thing is that, she's suggesting that pre-planning is half the project with writing. The planning is really helpful and something that she does all the time now.
Great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Deb.
Deb.
Just a quick question.
Mhm.
Like she explained that agents would prefer not to see first person in a debut novel. Did she also stress what about point of view? Very few people, if possible, lots of people. I mean, did she express anything about that as well?
I'm not sure what your question is. She did say yes, that the first person narrative, especially from debut authors, agents will tend to tell you to rewrite the book in third person and then they'll look at it if they're interested in the book. Even though they're interested, they will not take it in first person. But what is your question then?
So I guess if you have a novel with lots of points of view,
Mhm.
do agents tend to frown upon that with a debut novel? Did Teresa touch on that at all, or
We talked about it briefly. You mean like each chapter is told from a different point of view? That
I-
kind of thing?
yeah, that, or that there's a lot of players instead of just that main character, that main protagonist, you know.
Right. Well, it sounds to me like you're doing a third person omniscient then.
No, I mean, actually mine are very, very small, very specific. But I was just thinking, she stressed this about um first person versus third person in a debut novel. Did she also stress what agents prefer with point of view as well? You know,
Well, point of view is third person. I mean, maybe I'm not explaining it well. In your case, are you talking about each chapters from a different point of view of a different person? And they're all
no,
speaking in
no,
first voice?
no. I guess I was just thinking, well, okay, she stressed this about the first thing. Did she stress that you can have too many characters in a debut novel, too many points of view that they also agents also don't like that?
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that.
It's
If it's
okay.
a third person omniscient narrative, you can have 25 people in the novel, but the outer, control of the novel is told from the third person.
Okay. Or it sounds like she didn't really say anything about agents saying, gosh, too many characters, too many voices. That wasn't an issue.
I, I can't say that came up. No.
Okay. Okay, that's
Because
good.
point
Thank
of
you.
view is the outer,
Right.
structure of the novel. If it's third person omniscient, you can have 25 people in the book, but the outer control, the POV, is third person omniscient in that case. So I would say it was something, that goes into different points of view. All I know is, like from the MFA classes that I had, you have to be very careful. You can't switch POV constantly. Either it's third person omniscient or each chapter is different, told through the voice of somebody. But even that being the case, it's usually not first voice, it's usually third person, but now it's coming through Billy or it's coming through Mary or I think maybe it's a problem here of definition of what POV means.
Thank you.
Mm.
Right. Anybody else? All right. Tom, would you like to share with us?
Hi. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And thanks, Louise. That was really great summary. It was very helpful because it reminded me of a lot of other presentations that I attended that were extremely valuable. So thank you.
Perfect.
And I really like the way you emphasized um, the pre-organization and carefully identifying audience. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm writing a memoir, and I realized even with a memoir, um, it's something I have to pay more attention to. And
Hmm.
I really was able to see why when you were talking, stressing all that. So, because it's a question of focus, and so
Correct.
I agree. It's so valuable. Um,
Right. You can imagine if you were telling, there are lots of stories that we could tell to a friend of ours. We could tell the same story to a child, and we could tell the same story maybe to our grandparents, and
yeah,
that story would shift subtly depending on who the audience is. It's still the same story, but having the audience identified, it leads you to choose the right adjectives, to make the lengths of the sentences correct, to use your metaphors properly. We'd use a very different metaphor for a friend one-on-one than we would for a child who might not get that metaphor. So by identifying your audience, whatever that audience is, it keeps you straight and on track. You have a kind of continual feeling throughout the entire story that keeps it even and right. It keeps it honest.
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, if I may, the last discussion about point of view and number of characters, I just want from my own experience, I just would like to add that I read a lot of fiction, mysteries, all kinds of stuff. I'd just like to add that some books just seem to be littered with characters, and it's not the numbers so much, but for me, especially at the beginning, I need to feel close to one or two,
Mhm.
maybe three
Mhm.
characters that I connect with, and
Correct.
they will help me through the entire book. So ultimately, yeah, it doesn't matter how many characters, but I've got to have that connection. Otherwise, I figure, well, I don't really care about any of these people yet. I'm not sure, just not sure. So anyway, that's just what I think part of the point is with that. So
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with you.
yeah. So anyway, the conference I felt was very, very valuable, as has already been described so nicely. Uh, just because of all of the things going on as well. And, just the book displays, the different publishers, all the people to talk to, all these things to stumble on, I think are very much what makes the conference interesting.
Well,
So,
Tom, if I can add to that, it was so much fun to hear you read as well. It brought your work to life for me, hearing you actually read your pieces. It was wonderful. So you get an opportunity to sign up and read in front of a room of about 20 people, all of whom participate and read. It's a lot of fun.
yeah.
But it's also great to, hear the author read their own work.
Yeah, well, likewise, I appreciate what you read, and it's just a great way for writers to get to know each other, with our work. Um, you know, so I'm kind of shy and timid and things, but if I'm reading my work, I tend to have this greater energy sometimes. So anyway, and speaking of the open mic, yes, very, very valuable. Partly because it's diving into a pool and you don't know what it's going to be like when you walk into the room. And the moderator
Mhm.
of the open mic we were at was very much of a outgoing performance type
Yeah.
person, as opposed to, let's say, a more restrained. And those differences, are really difficult to, well, you're not always ready. So I like that splash of whatever an open mic is going to be, because it really keeps me on my toes and helps me appreciate how I communicate my work, and what I also get to learn from how others handle it. So
Right. And Penny too, it was so much fun to hear you read your piece out loud.
So thank you. Yeah, we had the MC. I think we were all in the same room, but he was fantastic and just
yeah,
got the crowd energized. And it
Mhm.
gave us a chance to all get to know each other a lot better, like you
yeah,
said, Tom, through our work, which is just a different facade of seeing someone.
yeah, yeah, definitely sort of shook things up, broke the ice.
Mhm.
Even though I was in half a panic, I thought, well, that's okay. That's
We couldn't tell, Tom.
Mhm.
You hit it well.
yeah, well, that's part of the energy and part of the fun. Absolutely. It really is. Excuse my voice. So anyway, I wanted to mention a few other things in general, and then I'd like to talk just in a little bit of detail about the final prison uh, session that I attended with Nathan Gower. Um, before that, I also I'm just checking my notes here. Um, let's see. Yeah. So just the whole atmosphere, of the event, especially meeting new people and hearing other people read that I don't know, is especially energizing. So I always wonder, before going to a conference, well, is it, do I really want to bother? But every time I go, I thought, wow, yes, I really needed to do this. So anyhow, it's just great, and it was so nice to know several people from Chatham area, and by extension, other writer morning out folks. So I attended a poetry session that turned out to be all about concrete poetry, and it has its own charming nature in that the person leading it made me feel like I was in the third grade. And I thought at first I wasn't real happy. And then I thought, well, maybe I need to feel like I'm in the third grade for a little bit. And it was very interesting because it was very playful. And sometimes all of our writing is so serious. There's so much to lift. And so trying to write a poem in the shape of an animal, a dog or a plant or something seems silly, but it's actually a tremendous exercise, loosening up, but also just being flexible. So I definitely appreciated that. And I also attended a session that was labeled preparing query letters, which is a lot of work, drudge, I think. Um, and there was very good information, but it also was something that I fault myself for not having researched ahead of time a little bit, because there's so many choices at these conferences. And I realized when you started talking about, book proposals, that was the main focus, which means you're trying to, describe a book you haven't even written yet and trying to get a publisher to accept it and give you an advance. That's a whole level or type of writing that I am not at all engaged with. You know, um, it's like research. And of course it could be for fiction or anything, but ultimately, I decided to leave that session because it was absolutely not what I most wanted. And again, I thought, okay, I should really carefully look into these sessions to get the most out of the whole conference. And that was a good lesson. So I'm glad to say that the final session I attended was Nathan Gower. He's on the faculty at UNC Wilmington. I don't know if does anyone else. I don't remember if anyone else here was in that. Okay. Um, uh,
I also went, and here's his book, gang, and
oh, okay.
yeah,
Thank you. I
yeah,
was
yeah, Nathan Gower.
yeah, I was just going to reach for that, and
Yeah,
yeah. Well, if you, what did you think about it?
fantastic session.
Okay, why is that? Why do you say that?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot. I don't have my
Yeah,
notes in front of me.
right.
He was so clear. He had such great ideas. I have my notes here. You do your thing, and
Okay,
I'll add something if I
all
feel
right.
it necessary.
Okay, yeah. Well, I too was very impressed with his presentation, and I told him that afterwards when I had his book when he signed his book for me, and he said, "Oh yes," he said, "I decided years ago that if I'm going to teach, I need to be performative." And I thought, oh, that's what you call it. So it's like a reading in that it has some real energy. It is not academic. It is not a business meeting, even though that they can be passionate. But he was very engaged, you know, his voice moving around, everything like that. And I was just terribly impressed. And I thought, wow, if I had had teachers like this, professors, writing teachers, you know, over the years, I'd really, I'd be, you know, speeding down the freeway of, uh, you know, of writing everything. So what was, oh, Louis, are you ready to say something? Yeah.
Yeah, I can add to it. He's an amazing teacher. I could watch him all day long.
Yeah.
He was engaging. We had a wide range of people in the audience, and he had all of our attention. We were just rapt. One of the main things he talked about was he played the chord from the shower scene in Psycho. You know, that amazing uh, dissonance and harmony blended together. And he showed, you know, if you're into music, he actually showed you how to build that chord with, you know, with a major chord and then adding the minor sounds to it to basically throw the listener off. And that's the whole point of his writing too. He said, you want to defamiliarize tension. That was his term. So, you know, we all have different ways that as we read, you know, mystery novels or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be a mystery novel. He was saying that the reader comes to expect certain things lead us to tension. And what you want to do is surprise them, you know, with a chord that's off, you know, that's not quite right. So he said, you know, there's tonal surprise is what he called it, tonal surprise. And he talked about tension at the level of the sentence, at the level of atmosphere, and tension within the characters. To continually surprise your reader with something they don't expect by feeding them everything they do expect and then bang, hitting with that crazy chord that Hitchcock's musician, and I'm sorry, the musician is not coming to me right now, but I will. It is, yeah, no, not Victor Slavsky. Oh no. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the musician, but anyway, it's you know, giving the listener or the reader exactly what they want, and then bang, you know, hitting with something that's off and not expected. So tonal surprise.
Very definitely. And that's how he started it. And at first I was rather shocked. So I thought, you know, music, well, okay, but you know, usually music is just to get you in the mood or something. And that's not what the purpose was, as Louise just said. But it's to show you the power of the unexpected, the
Mhm.
dissonance. And and it just was so clear to me because I thought, okay, what books have I lately read that I really liked? And there's some mysteries. And part of the dissonance was, again, the unexpected elements that are brought into a very solid plot and, you know, description and so forth. but it it could be humor, which is always an unexpected aspect, especially in a mystery, for example, things like that. And
Mhm.
I just thought it was just such a validation of what I already knew I enjoyed, but failed to recognize that that's something I could try to do myself. And in fact, I now have decided I insist that I search out and really look for those unexpected elements.
Yeah, 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 for sure. He was talking about atmosphere too, that we kind of come to expect certain things. And just by inserting one tiny thing that is completely juxtaposed to what the readers are expecting, it catches them off guard and it's delightful. It's like finding a piece of chocolate when you're reaching in a like a bag of popcorn. Now he didn't say that, but that would to me that would be absolutely amazing, right? Eating
Yeah,
from a bag of popcorn, nice and salty and wonderful, and wow, I just got my favorite chocolate in there.
yeah,
Whoa, and it's shocking. He just said to defamiliarize the tonal expectations of the reader with a tiny little thing. He had us practice too. He would break for very very short time periods and tell us to uh, imagine something that we're very familiar with and write down all the details of it. And then challenged us to bring something in there that would be completely unexpected. It was a lot of fun. He also talked about atmosphere, place plus time equals mood. That we're in control of all that, and to think about it as if we are, literally uh, the puppet master of these things, and how much readers love to be surprised.
yeah,
Um, they love it.
yeah. Yeah, and it was compelling and beautiful. He spent some time along those lines describing what he said was his grandmother's trailer in
Mhm.
some rural area in Kentucky. And, I thought, well, I don't know, maybe, this is interesting. Of course, I think it's great, great scene, but he really, just gave details about the I think the chain link fence and what was in the backyard, sheds, details, details, details. And again, I tend to think, well, I don't want to bother my reader with details. Well, I had to ask myself, maybe I'm just too lazy to take the trouble to come up with stuff that would be really a strong part of what I'm trying to describe. And of course it is, characters, the scene, the setting,
Mhm.
and how people move. And again, those little unexpected elements. So,
And Tom, do you remember he said basically, obviously we want to have conflict in our pieces. That's what, is the bulk of our plot arc. But he said conflict is not necessarily interesting unless there's tension about how it's resolved.
yeah,
That,
yes,
just because you have a conflict doesn't mean you have an interesting book.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he
Mhm.
made that point very
Mhm.
clearly, the
Mhm.
distinction between tension and conflict.
Mhm.
Oh, of course, because conflict could be more like telling, but tension is showing. To my interpretation,
Yeah,
and
exactly. He said tension is like a rope, right? Pulling a rope can be pulled in two different directions, but we care because of what the author adds: pacing, revelation, literary epiphany, and opportunity in that epiphany that's being taken advantage of. The conflict itself actually isn't very interesting. It's how we handle it that is what makes the book.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so one little example that again back to his grandmother's trailer out in the country, he said there was a dog kennel and they're overgrown, and then he said, but there's no dog. And that just what that suggests is tremendous. It's huge. It's not so much the information, but it's just the idea of, okay, I want to know why. What happened? what has been going on here? And it just seemed really compelling. It made it intimate and personal. And maybe that sounds absurd, but I really felt that along with a lot of the other elements that he described. So, and that those details are all over, everything that we're writing. So, but Bonnie, I know that in your writing, there's a lot of wonderful detail that you've provided. I'll never forget. I forget the character's name, but the closet, the utility closet that they had uh, used for a dorm, their little dorm bedroom, uh, things like that, and the details provided. So anyway, uh, you know, uh, we have all of these environments. I think that we can work with so beautifully, and it really all goes to establishing the real life of the characters. So, sorry, I hope you don't mind that I mentioned that, um, but anyway, that's just part of it.
Bonnie,
So,
you're muted.
Tom is the one who kept after me to include more details, more details.
yeah, well, I appreciate it in other people's writing. So I have to ask myself, in all honesty, hey, what am I doing? In my work, to give it that richness. And again, back to our point here, the tension, uh, because details, are again a tension between the big events and the really personal, the things that we can feel and so forth. So anyway, just even that one session, 90 minutes out of the conference, that alone was well worth the trip for me. And of course, as we've already said, there are all these other you know sources of inspiration and instruction and so forth. So anyway, I certainly look forward to the next conference. And in fact, there are writers' conferences all over the country and the world for that matter. And I just feel very encouraged to maybe take a little risk and try to attend a few more of these throughout the year.
Yeah, it really was so wonderful. And I'm going to just quickly share um, this. We had 8 people. I don't know if y'all can see this, but we had 8 people from Writers Morning Out
Uh,
in our group, which is just incredible. I've not been to a writers conference yet that we had this many turnout. So it was so wonderful to get to know everybody here.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, thank you, Tom. Anything else you want to add?
No, no.
Okay.
I'm just glad to have a chance to share that experience. And yeah, nice picture. I realize that it's one thing to know a person, it's another, to know what they're working on, to
Yeah.
be somewhat familiar with their work in different ways. And it just really gives a lot of depth to the experience. And it's,
Yeah. And one of the,
yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. One of
Well,
the things I was going to say is it was so nice to have 5 different seminars and for all of us to kind of, I know a lot of us shared seminars that we did together, but many of us went to different ones. So to be able to come together and share our notes has been really helpful.
yeah. And for example, Sherry there in the picture, she's working on a novel, fiction, kind of a mystery. I'd never heard her read before, but she got up at the open mic and read. And I was just stunned because what her voice brought to her writing. And I just
Yeah.
thought it was amazing. I'd never really heard her read her work before. And I thought, oh, we have this dimension
Yeah.
So anyway, I was just so happy about this stuff.
And it is so interesting because seems so quiet
Uh,
and reserved, and then this story that she read was so powerful. Yeah, it was really interesting to see that side of her.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Well, I have some slides put together, but we can zoom through them and then I will email this slide deck to everybody so you can have it. It's pretty self-explanatory. But we had a wonderful keynote speaker to start, Ben Fountain. And he opened the conference by saying, if literature declines, that could lead to the fall of a nation. And I think in this age where books are being banned and a lot of things are being censored, it's really important to be a writer and to be a reader. So our jobs these days are more important than ever, I think. Writing gets down to the meaning of life, and a lot of humanity depends on language, and preserving that language through written works. The following morning, we had All Stories Connect, Writing the Forever War. So we had a panel of 4 military veterans, Mariah Smith, LJ Bowens, who was the MC for our open mic, Russell Worth Parker and Anna Fraula. Yeah, Fraula. They use writing as a tool to process and convey the realities of the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And I think between the 4 of them, they had 15 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, so they used writing. I loved this quote from one of them: if no one will listen to you, the page will. So they took a lot of what they experienced in war and were able to process trauma and moral injury through writing. The first session that I went to was called Curating the Details, How to Craft an Artful Narrative. And this was with Michael Ramos. He is also a veteran. And his major question to us was, how do you know what's important in the story? So we talked about form. What does your type of writing look like? Is it a poem, an essay, a short story? And how each form has its merits and also its constraints. So you get to play with your narrative by using different forms. What the structure is, what's the engine that's driving your work? We talked about time, either compressing time or expanding it by using tense and flashbacks or flash forwards. We talked about ordering and the sequence of events. You don't want to give your reader any room to question why you did something in the work. We talked about scene, how each scene must advance your story. And I know a lot of us know this already, but it's nice to get these reminders. And then showing versus telling. Showing is preferred, but telling can be good for brevity and transitions. And feel free to stop me if anybody has any questions here. We talked about language, thinking about sound as the lifeblood of what we mean to say, and then using strong words. And he emphasized especially using strong verbs in your writing. And then the point of view, like Louise had mentioned, kind of playing with the camera lens. Transfiguration, use it, which is a device for symbolizing a profound change, kind of that aha moment between you and the reader. And then treat yourself as the character of your story and allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable on the page. We talked about pacing. Don't let your narrative get bogged down by context. So you don't want to give a lot of backstory. And then subvert your reader's expectation. And I think, Tom, this is what you had mentioned too, or like Louise had said with the popcorn, having that little piece of chocolate, giving your reader something unexpected. Let's see, we can use punctuation to control the speed of a narrative, or you could use a big block of text continuous narrative to slow the pace or break the paragraphs down and use a lot of white space on the page to speed it up. First person point of view should be quick to hold the reader's attention. And like Louise was saying, first person is much more difficult than third person to pull off. As far as frame, he said, consider the container size of your work. So for example, a piece of flash fiction might be like a carry-on suitcase versus a novel, which is more of a larger suitcase. And consider how you're going to fit your narrative into those different containers. How are you going to challenge your reader as they're reading? And then a couple of final thoughts here. Do your research. A quick example, I'm writing a story about the 1906 earthquake and fires, and I had mentioned in one of my drafts about the smell of leaking gas. And I had a science friend of mine say, they didn't put that chemical in there until the 1930s. So you have to go back and change that. So really do your research. He suggested using breadcrumbing to create an artful narrative, leaving little clues for your reader along the way as you go. And then any decision you make needs to be in service of the narrative. So back to that idea that every scene has to count and be there for a reason. Any questions before we continue? Nope. Okay, session 2 that I went to was from a typed manuscript to a book on a shelf. This was with Robin Mura. She's the editorial director at Blair. We talked about different types of editing, and I won't go through this too much because I know that we're running out of time. But basically, there were 4 different types of editing. Developmental, this is really looking at your plot in the larger sense and making sure that there are no holes in your plot, that the story threads don't dead end, that your characters are all there for a reason, and things like that. Line editing and copy editing tend to go down into more of the minutia. And Robin, bless her heart, read the entire Chicago Manual of Style, which is over 1,000 pages. If you would like to do that, that would be great. But I can't imagine anybody would like to do that unless that's your full-time job. But really going through and giving your most polished draft before you send this in. And then proofreading is the final step. And she gave us this nice kind of flow chart of your manuscript to the book. So you turn in your final manuscript to the publisher. The editor will make some suggestions for revision. The author makes the revisions and turns it back in. And then the other editor may ask for additional revisions or they may approve it. As you go down the flow chart, eventually the final corrections are sent to the printer and you have your book. She encouraged you to get beta readers, have lots of different eyes on your work. Again, consult the Chicago Manual of Style. You can volunteer for small literary journals to kind of get a sense of how everything works. Read books from publishers and agents that publish in your genre. And then when querying personalized letters and emails, don't accidentally put somebody else's name on your query letter. And she said the publishing process usually takes 1 to 2 years, but closer to 2. So be prepared for that. Any questions here? Okay. Session 3, I'm going to skip over this one. This one was mostly a question and answer session from Clyde Edgerton. These were just some nuggets of wisdom that I gleaned from him. Dialogue is action. Never follow advice that doesn't make sense to you. He had just lots of little interesting things. Mostly people would ask something specific about their novel and he would give a piece of advice back. So I will go through that quickly. He said experience plus observation plus imagination gives you kind of a treasure trove of inspiration. And then we had a brilliant at breakfast panel discussion. This was with 3 editors and agents. Mostly what are agents looking for? They want to feel like only you could write that specific project. The writing in your query letter is really a representation of your writing as a whole. So err on the side of brevity. So be really concise and clear in what you write in that query letter. Comps are important because they show that you're a reader. So you should be reading in the genre that you write. I loved this quote, the proof is in the pages. So more than anything, they want to see how you write. Where are you published before? What short stories have you published? What kind of writer are you? And then one thing that helped me, they said for debut authors, consider junior agents who are still trying to get their careers started. So you don't have to go up to the top tier of agents. You can look at more junior agents who might be willing to work with you. Let's see. Then session 4 was Shining in the Slush, publishing work in literary magazines with Michelle Donahue. She's the associate editor for Ecotone. What do literary magazines publish? Prose, lots of flash or novella, usually 2 to 6,000 words. You can do hybrid or experimental work that combines language and art. And you can always do poetry also, so 1 to 5 poems. And I apologize for going through this so quickly, but I want to get through it, and I'll be sending this out when we're done. Why publish in literary magazines? Again, you build that writing community, you become a better writer, and you build your career. So again, this is that opportunity for agents to find your work and kind of see what type of writer you are. How do I publish in literary magazines? There are tons of organizations online like Chill Subs, Pushcart Rankings, Best American Rankings, New Pages, and Duotrope. I know Les in our group is a big proponent of Duotrope. And then make sure that you follow submission guidelines. And most are online through Submittable. Some journals will use an email or have their own database system. Let's see. She talked about rankings for literary magazines. You have glossies like the New Yorker and Harper's or the Atlantic. Then tier 1, like Plowshares or Southern Review. Tier 2, and then tier 3. And she gave a website at the bottom that you can look through all of these at. She gave us how to do a sample cover letter. This is my title. It's complete at whatever 1,000 words. And then giving your author bio in third person and keeping it very short. She gave an example of a good bio versus a bad bio. You want to talk less about yourself and more about your work and the agent that you're submitting through. Common errors, not following guidelines, that's a big one. That's why when we do our Flash Prose contest here and all of our submissions here that we're so strict about the guidelines. Possible outcomes after submitting, you might get accepted. In that case, hooray. If you get rejected, you may get a form letter, just kind of a generic letter that they send out. If you get a high tier rejection, it might give you a little bit more detail on why you were rejected. And then personalized will say, hey, I really liked this work. I'm interested in seeing what you have in the future, but this particular piece is not for us at this moment. Very rarely you'll get a revise and resubmit in which they tell you, hey, if you make these certain changes, we'll be willing to publish your work. One of her big strategies, she said, for submission was to find a model writer, find somebody who writes like you do and in the genre that you do, and maybe a writer who's 5 to 15 years kind of ahead of you in their journey, and sort of see how they've done it. And then last session was Making a Dream podcast with Mary Lambeth Moore. She has the podcast Recovering Debs. It's all about debutante culture in the South, and I highly recommend listening to it. It was fascinating. I had no idea that all of this went on. But she said you can convert a lot of your print projects into a podcast, and hers in particular was kind of a hybrid memoir. She was a debutante here in North Carolina, and yeah, it was really fascinating listening to her story. Most of the equipment and technology is fairly affordable, but it can get a little pricey if you want to have higher quality things. Recording is the least time consuming part. And she really stressed having a niche. So, for example, Southern debutante culture in North Carolina, you're taking, like Louise said, you have that inverted triangle. You have this sort of broad idea of debutante culture, but she's really narrowed it down specifically to the statewide debutantes here in North Carolina, which I think North Carolina is the only state left with a statewide debutante culture. She said there are about 4.5 million podcasts worldwide with roughly 580 million listeners. So that's a pretty big pool, which necessitates that niche that you're really saying, okay, I'm the one to talk about this very specific thing. In the US alone, there are about 2 million podcasts, though most have gone dormant. They were a flash in the pan, and now they've just kind of gone into the shadows. Um, a lot of podcasts are also appearing on YouTube to have sort of a video accompaniment of that podcast now. Um, she said getting ranked is surprisingly easy. If you get 30 downloads in the first week, you're already in the top 50% of all podcasts. So I think hers had gone up to a fairly high ranking. She talked about writing for print versus writing for a podcast. In podcasting, it's best to write in short sentences or to pause between long sentences. Most listeners are doing something like cooking dinner or driving in their car or doing some other task while they're listening. So you want to make this really easily digestible. She suggested watching out for tics, saying a lot of ums and you knows. She said podcasts can be very intimate because, like Tom was saying in the open mic, when you hear somebody read their work, it's a much more intimate experience than if you're just reading it on the page. It's hard to hold attention with just one voice. So many podcasts have either a co-host or they have guests on the show. You need to be good at practicing strong interviewing skills. And the nice thing about podcasting versus print is that sound is a unique tool you have. You can play music, you can use sound effects. The intonation of your voice will change how it's presented versus on the page. And she said the majority of episodes run 20 to 40 minutes. So as far as choosing a topic, find something that fascinates you. Don't go for what's popular at the moment. So if vampires are all the rage right now, chances are there are 300,000 other podcasts about vampires. So try to find, again, your niche there. And then defining the heart of your podcast. So we worked on establishing your purpose, the why of your podcast, and then your defining statement, the what or the how. As far as research, accuracy is key. She suggested learning more than you'll actually tell and draft more than you'll use. And then think of who you'll have on your podcast and what kind of debate you can welcome to kind of create that tension and tease out those problems in your podcast. Be conscious of libel laws. She was very conscious of this with her podcast on debutante culture. And one of the reasons she did not want me to specifically share her notes, these were all notes that I took in class, but she did not want me to share her slide deck. But also be fearless and reach out. You never know what you'll find when you interview people. Most importantly, risks and rewards. If you're doing a podcast, you are putting yourself out there. Getting personal can be kind of scary, and sometimes collaboration can be stressful. But on the flip side, the rewards are that you feel heard. She said she got an outpouring of emails from strangers who related to her content. And in her case, collaboration was really amazing. She was able to tell a great story and she achieved a good purpose. These were some examples she had of podcasts that are really well written if you want to get a sense of writing for podcasts versus print writing. And that's it. So I hope that was helpful. I'm sorry to hold everybody over. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? No? Okay. In that case, Tom, I know that you had mentioned that there is the spring conference for the North Carolina Writers Network. It will be on April 18th. I know that's a ways out. And that one will be at UNC Greensboro. And that one is just a one-day conference. So it is more affordable. And I think there are usually 2 to 3 sessions in that one. But that's another chance to do an open mic. That's another chance to get to know other writers and really network in the area. We are so lucky in North Carolina to have such a pool of great writers. And the more people you know, the more often you go to these conferences, the more you start to see the familiar faces and get to know people. So if nobody else has any questions, we'll wrap it up for the day and everybody can go enjoy this beautiful November day.